Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to 2023. Welcome to Solo ReacTalk. Tonight I'm going to be reacting to a Commissar story, Harvest Day, made by Old Man Reacts. If you want to check out my previous reactions to the other A Commissar Stories videos by Old Man Reacts, remember the playlist card is going to be at the top. Just click on it and be able to access them. If you want to check out the original video as well as Old Man Reacts YouTube channel, the links are going to be in the description below. Yes, I think it's like 2 weeks back. Avathon 4 has 4 days. Yes. 4 days to get themselves ready, 4 days to prepare, all forms of defense, weapons, personnel. 4 days. They have 4 days to prepare themselves for a possible invasion of the Tau on the planet. And this is all the result of, betrayal, the destruction of the military headquarters on Avathon 4, and the death of various important people, that are required for the continuation of bureaucracy and military oversight on the planet. The only one so far who has survived is the Commissar himself and a tech priest, if I'm not mistaken. Or was he still a beginner? I'm not sure. Did I write down? Yeah, tech priest Freingren. Yes, him. Sorry if I pronounced his name incorrectly there. But yes, not a lot of people survived the explosion that was created by the PDF commander. He's the one who blew up the regiment command center. And yes, the Commissar is now trying to organize a defensive effort that will possibly or potentially repel the Tau from Avathon 4. Will it be successful? I'm not sure. It will be dependent on many factors, and hopefully the Commissar can find a solution, in time, because 4 days is just, you need a miracle. Yeah, you need a miracle. Okay, let's start. 3, 2, 1, go.
Everything became a blur after that, Jeffries. Reports came in, and there were shouter replies and all this other kind of stuff going back and forth through Voxhailers. I can't really remember much, but I dream about it some nights. I wake up with names and these orders in my head that I just don't remember. The moment that Vrol's worthless corpse hit the ground, the entire world seemed to come in these whispers and light flashes. I can remember introducing Tech Priest Phasian to someone in the regiment and saying that the Tech Priest was to be assisted in any way possible.
Phasian. Okay. Phasian. So why did I... Phasian. Okay.
I remember this real short conversation with an old man who I thought was a local politician, but what I remember the most in the haze, Jeffries, it was the anger, the lack of fear in all of them. The entire population just seemed to be a hornet's nest. When the PDF began to arrive on scene, that's the one thing I remember too, Jeffries. When they began to arrive, I assumed the worst, but they were in the same state of mind. Everyone just had the same expression. First it was shock and just stunned silence looking at what was left of regimental command, and then this anger that just seemed to be building. Everyone looked at the smoke, then everybody just looked at the sky where they thought the fleet was coming from. No one was afraid. More than the smoke, the fire. In the flashes I do get from that day, I remember the faces. I don't know when I got back at the Tauros or when I pulled up to the farmhouse, only that it made sense at the time for me to be there. I remember this tiled white shower floor just red with water that washed the blood and ash out of my hair. In fact, the next thing I remember clearly, I was sitting in a chair. I was looking at a pic of me and a few of my guardsmen. It was Kolo's house, and his wife was pouring a recaf into a cup, and she was saying nothing. I looked up into her eyes, and I must have startled her. I don't know how long I had been sitting there. I don't know how long I had been just staring into space, and she almost dropped her rifle. She was armed and by the throne. You'd think I hadn't seen an armed civilian all day, when only an hour ago I'd have been surrounded by, what, hundreds of them? Thousands? She said something and then slung her rifle across her back and set the recaf pot down. I looked around and got myself up from the chair, and I really didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. My mind was just blank, and it's almost like the day flooded back into me. I brushed my hand down the uniform I wore, and it was clean, it was pristine, and it was only 2 days later that I found out that some sergeant in the PDF had gone into the regimental headquarters building and found my uniform locker and brought it to me before I got to Kolo's house. There was so much to do and so much to see to, but more than that was a single overriding doom that weighed on me like a mountain.
You know, despite all that has happened, right, and the catastrophe, I would say, with the destruction of the regional command center, right, the people of Avathon IV are still here. They're not panicking, they're not running away. Many of them are holding weapons, but in a responsible manner. They're not out here shooting and being paranoid and killing anything that moves. They are focused, and they are giving support to the Commissar. Maybe the Commissar cannot really comprehend that yet. He's still going through, I don't know, the stages of surviving such an ordeal or such an experience. Having a bomb exploding in your face, you can't just walk away from that being okay. It's going to take time. And yeah, the people are here. They're making sure that the Commissar is okay. They're helping the Commissar look presentable with his clothing. And yes, he is a very lucky Commissar to be on a planet like this. I think I've discussed about this 2 weeks back, that if he was on a hive city or a planet with a higher population, you don't know, things might have been totally different for him. Like, it would have been extremely difficult. But on this planet, with its community-based culture, I should say, it's really, really working for him here. And this is one of the advantages of working in such small communities. Yeah.
I was the commissar of a quarter of a regiment, an infantry regiment no less, to fight a war against what? A Tau invasion force of what? Regimental command was dead. Command would go to Commander Thaddeus or Major Brusa. But was the lieutenant in the headquarters? I had no idea. I'd have to prepare the new commander to defend the planet, do my best to advise them, but who was in command? I heard the snap-crack of a single lasbolt outside, and I turned my head looking to where the sound came from, but then I just looked back to the pick. I never noticed that Kolo's wife had even left. The regiment would need to be fully armed and mobilized. It would need supplies, spare power packs for lasgun. The command center, wherever it was being established, would need new regimental staff, but where would they be drawn from? The hardest question was how to use a quarter infantry regiment to fight whatever was coming on those battleships and cruisers, and of course the escorts. We would be outnumbered. We would be outgunned, and Avathon IV didn't have any mechanized troop transports to speak of, so I already knew we'd be outmaneuvered. In every way I could possibly see in my head, we were outmatched, and not just outmatched, hilariously outmatched. What do I do? I kept on thinking that over and over as I stared at the pic, looking down at my own face reflected back on Kolo's end table. Surrender for a guardsman is an option. Surrender for a commissar is not.
Commissar, whoever becomes the new commander, right? You know, you guys got to work out a plan that uses your environment, right? You have to use your environment. You have to start thinking of ways of fighting that are not like a frontal assault against the enemy. You know, you have to think guerrilla tactics. You have to think hit and run tactics that will suit, you know, your people, and also use the civilians in the various communities of Avathon 4. You know, they are also not, you know, prepared or ready to be become these servants of a different empire. They're not prepared to be servants of a Xeno race. You know, even if it is the Tau, they're not ready or prepared to become part of their empire. So, you know, join forces with the civilians, use them for, well, not necessarily military purposes, maybe like reconnaissance, you know, maybe for light skirmishes here and there, but, you know, use what you have on the planet to your advantage. And, you know, I think the only way the Tau are going to ever be able to take over this planet is to turn it into a burning cinder. That's the only way they'll be able to take your planet, with you guys burned and dead. That's the only way. So find a way, Commissar. Find a way.
Any point. But I couldn't think. How do I keep my guardsmen alive? How do I fight this enemy? How do I try and hold off the end of everything?
Boss!
Kolo's voice just cut through my head, and I looked to the side, seeing him standing there with Viserion and some other guardsmen standing beside him. Kolo had called me 4 times, and I had just stood there.
Lieutenant...
Kolo paused then, and then he looked at Viserion. Viserion just shrugged down at Kolo.
Commander Yedrid just arrived here. He wants to speak with you.
Kolo motioned.
Is this a different voice actor? Huh.
To the door, and even as he made the gesture, I just started swearing internally. Brusa was dead or too injured to assume command, and this man entered the room. I was trying to remember who the warp Yedrid was. Kolo straightened and gave the Aquila salute. Viserion tried to. I made the hand motion for dismissal. My attention fell to the slim figure of a man who was now in command of the regiment and... Well, to be honest, Jeffries, I lost hope that I didn't even realize I had left. When Kolo walked out and Viserion ducked his head to move out the door, I took a slow drink of my recaf and looked to the new commander of the Avathon IV Rifle Corps. He was this thin rod of an officer, and I knew well why I didn't remember who he was. He was the junior administratum liaison, a supply officer.
A clerk? Okay.
And then as I looked at him, my mind just went through the faces I'd never see alive again. Thaddeus, Bruva, Lux, Gradius, Persephone, Seaton, all dead. All of them had been in the regimental headquarters. Had any of them tried to speak with me? What was the last thing I said to any of them? Both me and Yedrid looked at the window as another snap crack of a lasgun firing sounded outside. Commissar, we should... Yedrid began, then he just kind of faltered. His shoulders slumped and his hands snapped to the bridge of his nose. My training kicked in. This was the new commander, and I had to instill some sort of confidence. My hand shot up, and my palm was just steady in front of me, just in this motion to just stop. That is the last time. I was as stern as possible, and I glared at him. Yedrid looked back at me in surprise before I continued. You are the commander. Those men outside are under your command. My command? I know nothing about command, Commissar. Yedrid interrupted me, and I raised my eyebrow. That doesn't matter. The warp, it doesn't. Yedrid barked it out, interrupting me again. Commissar, I know how to file requisitions and relays. I know how to submit readiness reports. I even know proper uniform regulations well enough to quote you chapter, verse, and psalm. He turned from me. He walked a few steps, looking out the window at the men that were outside shooting their las guns. Commissar, I know every man and woman in this regiment's name, but none of their faces. I know their boot sizes, their uniform sizes. I know and can recite half of their family's addresses. He looked back at the window towards me, gesturing with his head to the sound of the men outside again. I know everything I need to know about how to supply them, because at the end of the day, Commissar, I am a clerk. He paused, and then he just looked up at me and nodded as if just to himself.
It takes a very big person to, admit that this is out of my depth. This is out of my expertise. I'm afraid I'll have to decline this position, give it to someone who is better suited for it. And I think that's right. We can't force people to become things that they're not. We can't force him. We can't force this person to become the leader of the regiment. We just can't do that. It will be a catastrophe. So it's really good to hear that from this person that, I am not that person you want to lead. I'm definitely not that person. So yeah, it's good.
Could stand here, and I could put on a brave face, go outside and start barking orders. But the only thing that would happen is I'd fuck it up and get a whole bunch of them killed trying to play some sort of fucking hero. I actually blinked, Jeffries. I tended to avoid supply officers as much as I possibly could. Most of the ones I had experience with had been short-tempered and brazenly egotistical, especially when dealing with stock standard guardsmen. They barely took the edge off for command staff. To actually hear a staff officer in supply reporting on his poor estimation of his abilities was surprising, to say the least. You will take command of the regiment. And now it was Yedrid's turn to raise his hand to cut me off. And that's not a request. Before my objection even got started, he put it down. I put in the paperwork before I even came over here. I breathed out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Commander Yedrid, Commissars rarely take overall command. They do under these sort of circumstances. It's in the regulations. And suddenly I believed him, and his claims of being able to recite boot sizes and addresses. The guidelines for commissarial command authority, that's a vague general order. But he was right. Besides, I never completed advanced tactical training, or even basic tactical training for that matter. I stood there for a moment, and when the sound of another shot rang out from outside, I heard a few men just jeering, and I glanced outside to see Kolo shrugging. His wife had her rifle shouldered, and she was lining her sights. I looked back to Yedrid. Very well, Commander. As of this moment, I have commissarial command authority. It was all I could say, given the circumstances. There was another snap crack of a lasgun, and just like that, Jeffries, now I was in command. Before Yedrid had walked in, I thought my head had been swimming, but now it was drowning. Which brings me neatly along to the surplus supply depots. Yedrid folded his arms behind his back and just stared at me. Surplus? I thought about all the times I had used 4 to 6 hours to inventory the warehouses that held the regiment's last packs, heavy weapons, long-last kits, and rations. At no point had I ever heard about a surplus depot.
This kind of reminds me of, what was that movie called? Hell's Reach, yes. On Armageddon, the tech priests also kept a stash of weapons and, armaments and all versions of, destructive weapons down in a bunker somewhere on Armageddon to be used for future uses. So I think it's something similar here, where, there is a stash of weapons and armaments and all forms of offensive and defensive weapons kept away to be used only in dire situations, like when the planet is being invaded. So it's something similar like that. Whether they will find, tanks and possibly a Titan, or anything of significant destructive potential, I'm not sure. But yeah, I think it's something similar like that. Yeah.
Yedra just nodded at me and he held out his hands as if he was apologizing. I don't have a data slate with me, or I'd have the sites for you. The coin seemed to drop for him at that moment. Commissar, we only have a quarter regiment, and the Avathon Rifle Corps hasn't deployed since, His voice trailed off and he waved the thought away, and then he began gesturing with his hand as he spoke, using his hands to explain as much as his words, which was helpful, because just as clueless as he admitted to me he was about how commanding men in battle worked, I was just as confused about how supply and logistics works. Remember, it was my first regiment. Before this, I had been a cadet commissar. I had been promoted at the end of a war and then immediately shipped off here for 6 years. Commissar, we are slotted with a tithe of 1 regiment of infantry to the Imperial Guard. We have a constant manned-up quarter regiment of veterans. He made a motion to the men outside. And every time we are given a mobilization order, we submit our readiness reports and prepare to mobilize 7,500 of the PDF's best into the ranks and move. I watched Jedred as he began to pace back and forth, motioned to me as he made point after point. When we do that, we submit a readiness report which includes a requisition for replacement lasguns, packs, rations, all of it, Commissar, regardless if we actually deploy. Wait. He stopped as my head began to work through the math of what he had just said. How much do they send you per mobilization? Well, that depends on how close we get to being deployed. Most of the time we get nothing, but at least once every few years we get enough to replace and rearm a new regiment. Yedred motioned to the window. The Department of Munitorum is supposed to dispatch a cargo hauler once every few decades to pick up the excess, but, well, you know how these things go sometimes. I finally saw what the supply officer was getting at, but I wanted to make sure I wasn't getting ideas when none should really exist. When was the last time that they did?
Okay, so, the supply of these refreshments and armament and stuff like that is not related to the tech priests. It's not related to the tech priests of Mars. This is just something that the Administorum does, whenever a regiment is close to being called up for duty. So we might not get tanks, we might not get any kind of mechanized, armaments, and it's okay, we'll still use whatever is there. Rifles, grenades, flak jackets. Yeah, it's still good. We just need people in those armor and having those weapons and grenades and stuff like that. We just need personnel. And that's why I'm saying I think it's time we involve the community of Avathon IV into the defense of their planet. Instead of them just hiding in shelters. We're going to need them out here on the battlefield. I'm not saying elderly people or children or, I'm focusing mainly on young adults, on adults. They're the ones who have to come out and fight. It doesn't have to be forced, but, the security of the planet must be, conveyed to them to say that this is very important. We need to defend Avathon IV from this Xeno threat. Yeah.
My head snapped back to the side again. I heard another lasgun fire off. And then I looked back to Yedred. Yedred actually laughed. 30 years. I felt like my eyes were going to come out of my skull. And he shrugged again. Jeffries. With the regiment at quarter size, I had already begun spinning these ideas in my head for tripling the amount of heavy weapons teams. Maybe assigning a few more specialist squads, but this? 30 years of Munitorum oversight? I used to curse every time I didn't get a supply order for Shiner or a case of Amasec from my homeworld, but right now I wanted to find the highest ranking member of the Munitorum and kiss them. How much equipment are we talking about here? Another snap crack of a rifle, and me and Yedred both looked to the window. Well, give or take a few units here or there. 15. Looks like they're picking off a Turpin nest. The second half of that statement flew over my head, and I simply stared out as I saw Visterion. The las gun looked like a toy in his hand as he took aim at something I couldn't see. Visterion, he probably could have looked a space marine in the eye. Kolo made a show of hiding behind another guardsman, and his wife was rolling her eyes. Visterion took a shot in the distance, and his head just hung as he apparently missed whatever he was aiming at. Kolo stepped forward and snatched the lasgun out of his hand, all the while looking like he was talking every form of garbage possible. With this smooth motion, he drew the rifle to his shoulder and sighted down the iron sights of the galaxy-patterned lasgun and fired. Visterion just seemed dejected and shook his hand as Kolo turned and bowed at the waist. And as Kolo straightened, I could actually see him say, and that's how it's done.
Must be a decent-sized nest. How long have they been at it?
Yedred asked, but I was moving. I was seeing something here, but
Nest? Well, what are they shooting at, actually? Yeah.
I just didn't know what. What's a turpin? I opened the door, the mug of recaf still in hand, knowing Yedred was following me. He grunted as I came to a stop where I could better see what they were shooting at, only to realize that all I could see was a path left unsown, but it was between these two large fields of grain.
A pest.
The detest Yedred said that with was plain.
Hard shell, blind, but a nest of them will eat their own body weight in stalks. They burrow, too, so they can make furrows in the field. Causes all kinds of problems if you don't handle it. Of course, if you try to go up to the nest, they'll feel you coming and just tunnel deeper or pop up somewhere else. The locals say it's best to shoot them. They don't even seem to realize when one of theirs gets popped.
So it's like whack-a-mole, but with guns.
It's why almost everyone has a rifle.
Popped? What do you mean popped?
You know.
I gripped the handle of the recaf in my hand, seeing something here, but I really couldn't see it. I had a dozen other things to do right now, but I was just staring. A guardsman lined up, aiming at something I couldn't see. Yedred pointed.
Just wait, you'll see. There, you see that patch of earth about half a K that way?
Just as I saw what he was speaking about, the guardsman shot and I saw something small pop up from the ground. The guardsman turned and I saw the eyes in Jeffries. It was him. Again. The same guardsman. He clenched his fist and nodded to Kola.
You see, he popped him.
Yedra just crossed his arms and blew out a breath. They had been shooting, with iron sights, at a creature that couldn't have been larger than a small rat, at almost half a kilometer away. And they had been hitting them.
These guys are good shooters. Really, really good shooters. Oh.
Suddenly the coin finally dropped. Jeffries, I had spent years poring over personnel reports. I had made mental notes. All the guardsmen in the regiment, almost 90% of them had qualified as marksmen. And on top of that, a fair amount of them had qualified as sharpshooter. I remember nights where I saw candidate after candidate for sniper specialization and personnel files that I had read. An abnormal amount. This idea formed in my head, and it started to grow to what felt like an inferno. Commander Yedred, how many long-last sniper rifles do we have? I just began stalking forward, and I heard Yedred begin walking after me, and he stuttered for a second before he replied.
Well, we'd have to have at least, 50 assigned per 10,000 rifles, 750 plus any you already, 800.
I kept marching towards my guardsmen. They all noticed me, and they were quickly standing and straightening up. I guess it was my expression. And how many standard scopes past that? How many heavy weapons, mounted stubbers, anti-armor munition? Yedred suddenly seemed to understand what I was getting at because now he marched alongside me.
Thousands.
There was a confidence in his voice now. I stopped in my tracks and I took a slow breath. In the back of my head I heard my own dark thoughts betraying me, Jeffries, that I was only delaying the inevitable, that anything I did would be pointless. But then I looked to Yedred and I felt those thoughts vanish. We would be outgunned, and we could be outmaneuvered. But that didn't matter. It didn't matter as long as I could make them hurt. It didn't matter as long as I could make them bleed. We have 4 days.
Make them work for it. Make them cry and complain for it, you know. Make it so difficult for the Tau to capture this planet, Commissar. That's why I'm saying the only way they'll be able to get this planet is if they burn it to the ground.
In 4 days, I want all those long las in our hand, and every las gun mounted with sights. We'll need to coordinate with Tech Priest Phasian, find out where our new command and control is, and plan the defense from there. I came to a stop, seeing that the guardsmen had noticed us coming and were waiting for us. We are not an infantry regiment. Not anymore. I have promotions to issue.
Should I give the order to assemble the regiment there?
I looked back to Yedred and nodded to him, and he turned and began running back to the small transport that he had ridden here in. A few hours later, and I was standing in front of a table, these small wedges of paper representing the new order of the regiment. Kolo, Viserion, Yedred, Avatari, Xavier, and Hauser were paying attention as I drew out these lines and made notes, designated units, displayed these plans. As I made my way around the table explaining the tactics I had in mind, there were these nods of assent. No one had any questions, there were only suggestions. We were in Phasian's personal choice for a command center, some old bunker apparently built during the days when the planet was wild and untamed, and even now the Tech Priest was working on establishing a new Vox link from the stashes of combies that had been brought up from the primary munitions warehouses. I think a lot about this night, Jeffries, because back then I never once thought about, well, any of it. I never took time to think about how they adapted so quickly. I never thought about how far they had come. Outside the bunker, I could hear motion, vehicles, in the boot falls, and orders and responses. At that moment, Jeffries, all I thought about was getting them in line with my thinking. I didn't think how proud I was of all of them. My regiment. My guardsmen. Looking back now, when I landed at the spaceport in Ceres, I wouldn't have trusted any of these guardsmen to tie their own shoelaces, but here I was dictating a battle plan.
Look at you. Look at you, Commissar. Huh.
I would glance up and catch a grin here. I'd see Viserion's massive hand come down and gesture at fields of fire and overarching passive approach. Viserion... You know, Jeffries, Viserion might not have looked like it, but he was one of the brightest guardsmen I ever had the chance to meet. Even if he could be confused for an Algren half the time. I remember that table. How every so often somebody came in to give a report and my new officers just fell into their roles. And Jeffries, I didn't think about it back then, but I think about it now. I did good, Jeffries. I did good. When the war came, they were ready. As ready as they could have possibly been. They weren't scared. They were prepared. Even if I couldn't see it then. I dismissed everyone as I finished, and as they filed out, I stared down at the table. I don't know how long I was alone in there, Jeffries, just staring at these little cut-out pieces of paper and these lines using thread, just symbolizing attack and approach.
Boss?
It was Kolo.
I don't mean to disturb you, but the mayor of Ceres is here to see you.
Is this another voice actor?
He wants to discuss what he can do.
Kolo motioned with his head to the door. I shook my head and just raised an eyebrow. Well, I didn't know the mayor wasn't dead. Send him in. Better to get it over with now. Kolo didn't move as I was looking at the map, and I realized it when I looked up at him. Something wrong, Lieutenant? I saw a look in his eye. I couldn't quantify it at the time.
Commissar, when you were talking about everything, I noticed that you left out anything that relied on the civilians.
He stepped up to the table and spread his hands on it. He took a breath before looking at me. Kolo tapped his finger on the table, then he gestured outside, where, out of my line of sight, the mayor stood waiting. I grinned and I just shook my head, wondering if he was playing with me.
No, he is serious.
But then I looked up. He was completely serious, Jeffries.
I think we should consider the role the population could play in this.
I just hid my smile. I'll consider it, Colo. And truly, I thought the second he walked out, I would consider it not at all. When Colo left the bunker, I just shook my head, and then I turned and steadied myself to talk to the Mayor Ceres.
Commissar, don't be a fool. Don't be like that. Don't. You're gonna need the people of this planet. You're gonna need the people of the town Ceres. You're going to need them. Don't scoff at them.
Jeffries, I had a feeling of what I was in for. I had seen something like this before. Local leaders coming to military commanders to wish them all the luck and blessings of the Emperor, all the while lodging complaints about troops and comforts. And I turned my back on the door and rubbed the bridge of my nose, bracing myself. It was the wrong time for this. The last time a civilian had complained to me, it was a local council member upset that my guardsmen had tramped down a part of their field. And if that was any indication of what I was about to get...
You're a busy man, Commissar, so I'll make this quick. We need at least 10,000 power packs and as many las rifles as you can spare.
Ah! Yes. Say yes. I approve. Oh, gosh. And is this also another voice actor? There's so many voice actors here now. Oh, that's good. That's good. Or maybe this is still Old Man Reacts. Maybe he has modulated his voice to sound this way. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's good. Good performances so far.
You should have seen my face as I turned to the door. I spun on my heel and looked. There was a behemoth of a man in the doorway. His arms were just crossed over his chest, staring at me as I just took him in.
Also, if you have any men skilled at building improvised devices, we are ready. We have tools.
I just blinked once. I had been completely taken off the heel. Jeffries, this day had been a day of surprises. Mayor...
Call me Renaud.
He stepped forward and offered me his hand. In my surprise, I actually took it. He was a farmer and he had the rough grasp of one. Renaud. I centered myself before I continued. No offense, but I'm concerned. I'm concerned about giving military hardware over to the civilian population.
And why is that, Commissar?
He took his hand back and crossed his arms. He was not at all what I had expected, but then again, what did I expect anything less from this world? What had I actually expected, Jeffries? It's only a matter of time before the Tau land. And I motioned to the outside. When they do, the first place they head to, if they don't outright attempt a landing there, is Ceres. It'll be the first priority for them to take the port.
This we know. This is why we made the request.
Suddenly, the coin seemed to drop for him about my general opinion about civilians, and when he spoke next, he...
Are you thinking we will surrender?
The way he spat that out almost made me reach for my bolt gun. Civilians tend to panic. I matched his anger with cold detachment. They wind up turning or getting in the way, and the last thing my guardsmen need...
Commissar, the population of Ceres is 32,305, and in the past 6 hours I've had over half that report for the militia. We've stopped counting.
I held up my hand, but he was not done.
I know what you're thinking. This is not some hive world where they pack people like seed in the buildings. This is not some cult-infested pleasure world. This is our world.
He jabbed his finger down towards the ground as if he was staking a flag where he stood, and then he pointed at me.
Yes, Mayor Ronald, yes.
We live with each other, we love each other, we share the shirts off our back, and you know this.
He stepped back and threw a hand to the roof.
We know what they'll do or what they'll try to do.
He spit on my table then as if the taste of the words he was about to say were just poison.
They bribe fools with gadgets and toys. They preach about the greater good, but the greater good only means what they want it to mean. They try to separate the bonds that bind us together and replace everything good and honest and decent about us with their lies.
I see why you are the mayor, Renault. I see it now. I see it. Ah!
Reynolds came to stand directly in front of me.
They get neighbors to turn on neighbors, family to turn against each other. We've heard the stories, we all have. Not here, Commissar. I will be dead and gone before I allow it, and there's an entire city that feels the same way. So, if you have the time, I need at least 10,000 power packs.
Colo! Finally, it was my turn to cut the mayor off. Colo poked his head in the door. The grin on his face was unmistakable. He had been listening to the entire exchange. If I wasn't suppressing a grin of my own, I'd have him flogged for it. Get on the Vox and tell Commander Yadred I want 20,000 power packs and an adequate charging cell sent to Ceres. I stepped past Reynolds as I talked, but I talked loud enough so the mayor could overhear everything I said. Tell Yadred if he needs a convoy can come take possession. Also, any heavy weapons that there's no chance we'll need. I looked back at Yadred. I assume you won't have a problem transporting. Reynolds simply shook his head, a grin from ear to ear, and I turned back to Colo. Any of your men know how to rig a power pack? For the second time in less than 30 seconds, I wanted to have Colo flogged. The smirk on his face was unmistakable.
Leave him alone. Let him be happy.
Grab them and send them with the mayor.
Right, boss!
I turned back to the mayor, then motioned to the butt of the last gun he had on his shoulder. Well, do you need any of my guardsmen to teach your people how to shoot?
Do you know where you are, Commissar? Have you seen what they've been able to do? You know, shooting those pests in their nests. Nah, they don't need any training. They know what to do.
I grinned at the mayor, then I motioned to the table. Let's talk. Jeffries, the next 3 days went by, and a storm of this movement, cut up by pauses where there was either training or strategy. On the third day, when I rolled into Ceres on my Tauros, the entire population seemed to be bristling. No fear. By the throne, Jeffries. Looking back now, I can't ever believe that I doubted them. Of course, there was a general evacuation, but even from what I heard, no one wanted to leave.
Sorry, Old Man Reacts. I just need to say that this needs to be, adapted to a TV series or a movie. Actually, yes, a movie. A Commissar story. Definitely, it needs to be adapted into a movie. It has that movie feel about it, Yeah, it's good. It's really, really good. And since Warhammer 40k is now, coming into the entertainment industry in terms of global television and global entertainment rights and all that kind of stuff, maybe instead of focusing on Astartes and the bigger things in the Warhammer 40k, they can focus squarely on communities, and commissars and regional command structures and PDF forces, the smaller guys, the guys who are not having all of these superpowers like the Astartes or the Inquisition or the other Xeno races. Let's start out with the community-based, television series centered around the culture, the religion, the communities of those in the Imperium of Man, to get that foundation. So I think a Commissar story is really something that can be adapted into a TV series or preferably a movie. Yeah.
Young were leaving and some of the older, but it was almost forced. And I was stunned at the resolve I saw. I just was hoping at the time it wouldn't fade away the second things got messy. I felt like in my head there was a countdown, and the closer it came to 0, the more anxious I was getting, and I was trying to bury it. Ceres would be the linchpin of the entire invasion, and I knew it. So for those 3 days there had been digging, there had been stockpiles made, trench lines dug and concealed, and every road into the city had been mined. There was so much more I wanted to do, but there was no time and no manpower to do it.
The city has become a fortress.
The regiment in only 3 days had shifted gears so completely that even today it stuns me. It was a hopeless fight, even if we had a year to prepare. It was still a hopeless fight. Even with the entire population riled against them, the Tau were coming, but I was ready. I was ready to fight here and die here. On the 4th morning, I was asleep, and I was dreaming about something. I can't remember. And Jeffries, that was the last good sleep I had for a while. They were here. Only 2 hours later, I stood on a road outside of Ceres, about 9 kilometers outside the city, and I was looking at this cloud of dust that was rising in the distance. I had the Tauros parked behind me, and it blocked most of the lanes. My bolt gun was holstered. My chainsaw was just sitting against my thigh. I had put on my best for this. I was wearing my commissarial uniform, all my buttons shined. It was the best dress uniform I had. There was a heat haze mirage on the road. It was growing just larger and larger, and I could see the tan shapes of the strange floating craft known as devilfish. I could make out about 6 of them, but I knew that there were at least 40 in the column. Around them I could see the strange hump-shouldered armor of the much smaller figures that were marching alongside of the vehicles. I already knew they could see me, and I steeled myself. I spread my feet and stood in the center of the road as if they just couldn't simply ride over me and crush me. I did my best to breathe steady, and I glared at the approaching shapes, and I was a lone figure of black and red standing on a road surrounded by gently bending stalks of grain, the wind making it seem as if the field was an ocean of gold and I was on a pier and not a road. I didn't move, even when they seemed to take note of me, even though I knew full well they already sent drones ahead of the column to check what was blocking the road ahead. Tau's stealth tech is good, but I had already made note of the 2 distortions in the air to my left and right. I was being circled by a pair of their drones, and I tried not to think about how easy it would be to kill me here and now. The heat haze finally resolved. None of the devilfish seemed to be training their weapons on me, but that didn't mean I wasn't dead to rights the second I reached for my guns, Jeffries. There was a lot of them, and all the strange helmets were looking right at me. As they got closer, the sound of those anti-grav engines of the devilfish had set my teeth on edge, Jeffries, and I lowered my head to shut out the sky. I knew there were at least 4,000 of them in this column, and as I waited, I just counted the seconds until one of them decided to take a shot. None of them did. I guess I was a curiosity to them, or maybe some sort of goal. The devilfish stopped about 20 meters away. The entire convoy seemed to ground to a halt, and even more of the infantry just poured out of the troop carriers. Even now, I have to appreciate it. When the convoy came to a stop, the entire formation went into defensive lines, and it was rank upon rank of Tau fire warriors lining either side of the road. I never looked away from the leading devilfish. It was the sole vehicle that hadn't opened itself up and deployed more of the Tau fire warriors. I just waited. Slowly the passenger compartment opened, and I watched as even more Tau spilled out, including one that looked nothing like the others. While every other one of its kind was dressed head to toe for combat, this one looked like it was ready at any moment to step into some sort of noble's ballroom party. It began walking towards me, and although I had faced the prospect of the entire column bearing down on me without a second thought, this thing unnerved me. As it walked toward me, it put on this big smile, spreading its hands and arms wide as if embracing the planet. It was a little taller than the others around, and it was built like a rail. And even as I watched
It must be a water cast.
his face, it seemed to shift. I had read about the Tau's water cast, but seeing them in person, it was a different matter.
I am Porla Viorwi Willam Sao, and this is Shasvre Vior Air Aruth.
It called out to me as it came closer, and it took everything in me not to pull my bolt pistol and just remove its head from its shoulders at that instant.
Is the Watercast member talking Gothic? High Gothic or Low Gothic? Huh.
It spoke flawless High Gothic, and with a bit of a burr. It was the exact kind of accent that a local man from Avathon IV would have, if not the same language. To its right there was a fire warrior, and it didn't take much deduction to realize this was the ranking officer of the column. I breathed, finally, as the two came closer, and I reached up and I grabbed the bill of my hat and I just slowly removed it, tucking it under my arm. I didn't look away, still fighting the urge to shoot the damn thing. The two came to a stop only a meter away, and I could smell this alien scent of their skin just wafting on the wind, Jeffries.
I guess they don't know anything about cologne or some sort of deodorant. Nothing. Okay.
I don't even know how to tell you how that smelled. Well, you can call me the Commissar. Quite a display of force you got here. I gestured with my chin to the entire column behind them both.
Yes, well, we're only ensuring that this world is protected.
Why does he sound Irish? Are you guys telling me that the Watercast of the Tau have an Irish accent? That's cool. That's really cool. That's actually very entertaining. Okay.
It's said that the Imperium is facing an incursion by the
Xeno's voice just trailed off, and he looked almost amiable at the helmeted form of the officer beside him.
What do they call them again? Tyranids? Yes.
Well, you are mistaken. This world is protected. I heard what could only be a snort come from under the helmet of the fire warrior. William Sau's hand came up, as if pacifying, and he smiled at the officer before looking back to me.
Pardon my fellow here. He's of the fire caste, and they're very direct. But he is right. Your world has less than, 2,500 Imperial Guard infantry. A little under 30,000 in its planetary defense force.
The Tau stepped forward again, opening its hands as if offering something. I wanted to step forward too, if only to see what that strange face could do if it took a punch.
We only wish to ensure that your world is safe. We have brought 80,000 fire warriors to your world, and not just infantry.
The smile on his face was so polite, almost endearing, but Jeffries, it made my skin crawl.
Like he is actually insulting our intelligence. He is condescending. He is arrogant. Why don't you just come out and say what you're here to do instead of coming here with this diplomatic BS of yours, and having opening, welcoming arms like that? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Shoot this guy, Commissar. Shoot him.
Now I knew what we were up against. 80,000, at the minimum.
We have brought every means available to ensure that this world is kept safe and secure from any threat.
Oh, really?
And should any of your citizens remain concerned, we can easily gather more from the fleet overhead.
Jeffries, that was the most single polite threat I've ever heard in my life. The smile on the smug Xeno's face was so grating to my nerves I almost let it reach my expression. Well, I can appreciate your concern for the welfare and safety of Imperial citizens, but it's my duty to inform you that you are not welcome here. I heard what must have been just barely suppressed laughter from the helm of the fire warrior officer, and that Watercast Tau actually blinked, and then it smiled even broader than I thought possible on its face. And for the first time it actually appeared as sinister as it really was.
I'm afraid that the decision has been taken out of your hands. If you decide to resist our assistance, we will do what's needed to make sure that this world is safe.
What are you talking about? Stop this. Stop talking like this. Just say what you're here to do. Instead of wasting our time here with, oh, we're here to protect you. Protect us from what? We didn't request for you people to be here. So what are you here to do? Tell us. Tell us to our face. Straight to our face. You're here to conquer us. You know, sort of coming here saying, we have 80,000, we are here to protect you,
The Tao's face returned to this nice and kindly expression.
I understand what your title signifies. I would hope that when you speak to your commander, you will convey our best wishes and promise him that the assistance of his regiment will be met with open arms, both now and in the future.
I looked between the two Tao, and then I just took the brim of my hat in my hand. Well, you make a good point and a decent officer, but forgive me for not being a proper diplomat. I raised the hat to my head and settled the hard brim over my eyes. And in my head, a countdown started. In that moment, as I looked back to the Tao, I silently prayed like a lost sinner with no hope of salvation, facing utter damnation. Time seemed to stop like water flash frozen into ice, and I saw the Tao begin this almost overdone stately bow. I heard the beginnings of words formed on the Xeno's lips, and I felt like what seemed to be every atom of my existence come alive. Every doubt and concern, every second thought, every worry, and every report I had ever filed, Jeffrey's every single second of my life felt like it was stretching into eternity. I could hear Kolo's voice counting down in my ear, and I mirrored the Tao's gesture when he had first stepped out. I spread my arms wide and grinned. Welcome to Avathon IV. It's Harvest Day. The entire left side of the Tau column seemed to get scythed down where they stood, helmets and torsos erupting like exploding fruit, and I didn't wait a nanosecond. I yanked my chainsword out of its scabbard, even as I watched the fire warrior beside the water cask flinch, and I rammed the hilt into the flowing face of the Tau as hard as I could. Chaos exploded into life as Tau fire warriors tried to sight down, some on me, some on the distance, trying to find out what was firing at them. They never raised their weapons in time, and as I rammed my chain blade into the Tau's chest, I saw out of the corner of my eye another wave of Tau infantry collapse, blue, blood, and body fluids painting the grain in the sides of the devilfish. 2 seconds had passed. I heard the revving of drive engines. Viserion, now! I roared as I yanked my chain blade up, eviscerating the officer and charging the next, who was still moving despite missing his entire right arm. I didn't see the figures throwing off their cover, raising with crack launchers, yanking up heavy bolter mounts and setting them on the ground. Seconds turned into lifespans as the devilfish APCs swerved to attempt to cover the infantry on the ground. I ended the armless Tau and tackled another to the ground, whose rifle fired off into the air as I hit him. I didn't know if I was hit, and my chain blade fell away as I pinned the Xenos down, and at any moment I knew I was a dead man. I waited for the burn of a random shot. I waited for the butts of weapons that never came. I waited to die. My fingers took hold of my chain blade and I yanked it across the Tau's body as I came up. 5 seconds. The explosions almost took me off my feet, and the entire ground quaked as the first detonations and impacts hammered the earth. The grain seemed to billow away like water from shockwaves. The control deck of the lead devilfish exploded into a shower of fire and smoke, and the massive troop carrier hammered into the ground before rolling and crushing the infantry that thought to take cover underneath it. The Tau that had run to the left of the column never saw what killed them, as Visserion's heavy weapons line opened up on the right side of the road, almost a full 2 kilometers away.
Begin those mop-up operations, Commissar.
7 seconds. Blue blood and viscera watered the ground, and my bolt gun was out of its holster, and I was walking forward, emptying the magazine. The sounds of heavy bolters and stubbers rolled from the field to the right side of the road, even as the hidden death continued to pour in from the left. The entire convoy was smoking now, but even then some of the tower were beginning to return fire. I was thrown to the side as my shoulder just seemed to explode in pain, and I wheeled around seeing the drone that I knew had been watching me. It was correcting his aim. Thank the throne I had only been grazed. I yanked my bolter up, but before I could even pull the trigger, multiple beams of red crashed into it. I heard other drones taking flight, but every few seconds a metallic clang sounded as another one hit the ground. From the left side of the road now, I saw in the distance, in the straw yellow camo of the Avathon IV rifle corps, I saw my guardsmen advancing and firing, sighting down their rifles and raining a hail of fire on the road. The entire column was in flames. One of the devilfish was moving through the field, trailing fire and smoke in increasing speed as it barreled off into the distance. 20 seconds. I called into my comm bead to hit hard targets and then withdraw, and I turned and sprinted towards the Tauros. The watercast Tau was just now getting to his feet, and it pleased me to no end to see the absolute look of horror on its face.
Wait!
I hammered my fist into its face again, running past it, and I threw myself into the Tauros. My foot slammed into the accelerator. I spun my glorious battle tank towards the column, and the tires squealed before they bit to the road. Jeffries, I have to admit I was grinning, watching the watercast with his smug bastard face vanish under the tires. I cut into the field, watching as my guardsmen were falling back, covering each other as they withdrew. With a glance back at the tail column, though, Jeffries, I felt like telling them not to bother. 30 seconds. And as I pushed the accelerator to the red line, I finally heard the bark of the opening salvo of the attack. The sound was music to my ears, Jeffries. 800 long-last sniper rifles, at a range of nearly 7 kilometers, speaking in one voice.
Guys, the battle for Avathon IV has begun in earnest, and the Imperium of Man have struck the first blow. Strategic, precision, merciless, they are doing it so well. They're doing it so well against a force that is technologically far superior to them. They have the ships in space, they have everything, but they're still showing that this planet belongs to the Imperium of Man, and it's not going to be taken easily or lightly. You will die, you will bleed out for this planet. If you guys want this planet, be prepared to sacrifice everything. Oh man, this is so good. This was really, really good. Guys, this was a Commissar story, Harvest Day by Old Man Reacts. Yes, the Commissar is using everything at his disposal. He has the support of the PDF, he has the support of the original infantry, he has support of the civilian population of Avathon IV, and he has the weapons to back it up with all of his forces. And yes, he is here to fight until the bitter end, and the enemy is simply not prepared for that. They are not prepared. They thought they were just gonna roll in here, come here with their watercast negotiation skills that are just flimsy and condescending and just stupid, and thought that they could impress us or threaten us with their numbers. And the Imperium of Man has just shown them that that's not enough, to ask for us to surrender. It's not enough. We're here to fight for this planet, and yeah, they've been given a rude awakening, and it's good. It's really, really good. The voice acting from the different characters was also quite interesting, and the the watercast being having an Irish accent, that was quite enjoyable. Like I said before, I've never really seen it that way in my mind, having a watercast member speaking in such in such an accent, but this was interesting. Now it's stuck in my mind. Anytime I hear or anytime I see a Tau, I'm just going to imagine that Tau speaking Irish with an Irish accent. I mean, and that's how I'm going to be seeing it. So yeah, it was cool. It was really, really interesting. And yeah, let's hope that the civilians on Avathon 4 and everybody else can continue to push back against the Tau in the next episode. And yeah, it's going to be a tough fight for them. This planet is not going to go easy. It's not going to surrender so easily to them. Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. Guys, that's it for this part. I think it's part 3. I think it was part 3, Harvest Day. Yes. Remember, guys, if you want to check out the original video as well as Old Man React's YouTube channel, the links are going to be in the description below. If you like my reaction, please give me a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Click on the notification bell if you want to be up to date with my latest videos, and I will see you guys next week. So good.